It's Grudge Match Day! You know what you're in for. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Jam Shed, and welcome to this week's episode of Grudge Match. And for those of you that are new to the channel, and you're saying, what the heck is a grudge match? Well, it points back to the spirit of everything we do here in this channel, which is me exploring my curiosity and then passing these thoughts that travel in my brain and these ideas I get to test and do basically a shootout where there's only one rule, that there are none. And so for today's episode, I'm very excited to put on the bench, check it out right here. Boom, here it is. We have two DOD pedals. We have the Grunge from 1991 and the Death Metal, which I have no idea, probably somewhere in the 90s. I'm gonna guess that timing. But we have that on the bench, and if you're going, well, why? The question is really, why not? Because yes, we can. And let's just get right into the spirit of what this is going to be about today. So we're going to do a fun little shootout test, listen to these pedals, and then answer a couple of simple questions, which really revolve around, parting ways with your money is a reality. But often I think, as I've explored and will continue to explore, and even on this channel, that you might have tones that you can create, discover, with gear that you didn't know could do certain things. So like the Metal Zone, I'll point back to that, done some videos on that. And it's coming to surface a lot right now that the Metal Zone is way more versatile than what we would have imagined, especially if you're an 80s, 90s kid like me, where that pedal was just it was not seen the way it is today. We'll leave it at that. But going back to these two pedals, the same thing. And sometimes there's value in exploring gear that you have or gear that you're looking to acquire. So you're kind of running two parallels here. It's the position of being in, hey, I want to explore and I want to hear something around a particular pedal, or hey, I've got these pedals and do they do the thing that this pedal I'm actually gassing over? For those of you who don't know what that means, it's gear acquisition syndrome, and I chase that with tone acquisition syndrome because we all have this thing we're hearing in our ear that we're constantly chasing, which prompts what I believe to be that gear acquisition syndrome. So let's talk about these two pedals on the bench very briefly. The Grunge pedal, as I've said, I know that's a 91 pedal. Did not do any deep research on the Death Metal pedal. I'll leave that to you all to help me fill in those blanks, but like I said before, I imagine they came in at right around the same time. So let me talk about the Grunge pedal first. This pedal was designed by Jason Lamb. My apologies if you're a Jeff Lamb out there. I'm not implicating you. This is Jason Lamb, and he worked for DOD, and he's responsible for designing several of these effects pedals, which FX is the series that DOD released in the 90s and maybe even before then, but that's where these pedals reside, in that series of FX style pedals. And I did a pedal shootout with the Grunge pedal, fell in love with it. It is awesome. I slept on this pedal for way too long. As a 90s kid around age 15 in 1995, I was not playing guitar, I was playing primarily drums, but I would have thought this pedal probably wasn't the best pedal and that there might have been more out there, mostly because grunge was a thing. And that's what's really fun with this whole series that DOD put out, because they were having fun with it. They were like, hey, grunge is huge right now. Let's drop a pedal around that. Oh, by the way, there's a death metal scene out here that we can drop a pedal about. And again, the reason why I was slightly triggered to make a purchase, which the Death Metal pedal is a purchase, and yes, gear acquisition got the best of me, not for tone acquisition reasons, but for the exploratory, we'll call it educational purposes. Never use that excuse to buy gear. And if you have and you're chuckling, you know who you are. So the Death Metal pedal and the Grunge pedal, they're hilarious. There's a unique sense of humor back then, and I'm gonna move a little closer here, but this the Grunge pedal has loud, butt, face, and grunge, and then the Death Metal pedal says rip, guts, and pain and scream. Listen, if you can't be fascinated by that as a teen, I don't care what era, what decade, that's freaking hilarious. DOD had a huge sense of humor, and I'm here for it, and that is actually the sole reason why I purchased this pedal. It was not about tone acquisition, nor was it, well, I guess you could say it's about gear acquisition, because I thought the wording was cool and the pedal was reasonable. But I really wanted to bring him here to the channel to just have some fun, more so because I did read in a comment that these two pedals are very similar. They follow a similar circuit. I don't know that to be true. No deep research was done here, and I am not claiming to be an expert, but one thing I think, reasonably decent at is having fun exploring tones. And so today is the first time we're going to hear the Death Metal pedal. We've already heard the Grunge pedal, and then I'll have one more you know, crayon in the crayon box, so to speak, to just have fun with and explore and ask questions and challenge and say, well, hey, this pedal's doing this, and what do I know to be true, and what are some sound comparisons, and if I have tone acquisition and I'm trying to attain, okay, enough. Let's get to the test. That was fun. Good rabbit hole. We'll visit that maybe in a shed talk a little bit more as we, and if you said, well, what the heck is a shed talk? Think of it as a TED talk, but with no time limit and me just pontificating like I just did on a rant for forever, and I'm still talking about it and still rambling. So now I'm going to stop that. I'm going to focus back on these pedals and talk about how we're going to do this thing today. So let me just unpack very succinctly what we discussed here so that we have at least some semblance of rationality behind why we're doing this. So the why is to explore, be curious, and to think about, are there ways for us to capture tones that we already have with some of the gear that we have? And then the second part of that is providing these tones for you to say, hey, maybe that's something I am interested in, but I'm not trying to fuel the gear or tone acquisition syndrome that we all experience. What I'm trying to do here is offer you an opportunity to have an unbiased, essentially fun review that might trigger you to say that's for me or not for me. And then the third component of this is to really just answer the simple question is, how similar are these pedals and how different are they? And what, finally, can we get out of them? So that's what we're here to do. Now that I've labored all of this way too long, let's talk a little bit about our rig today and some of the testing. And I'll start with how we test. So as you can see here, again, back up on the screen, is the rig. And the rig is quite simple. We are going to focus on eliminating variables, and that's what I usually do. I'll say we'll keep the volume all the way up because it gives us max signal to the potentiometers, which can vary based on the components, almost up to 20% sometimes. And then I do 3 tests, typically, sometimes 4. But I like to have the distortion or the gain turned all the way down so that we get the potentiometer at its lowest point of signal input, and then also again turned all the way up at its highest capability, because anything in between will give us the range, but it's hard to make sure that I know that I'm actually 50% in. So that is an easy application. And then the third test that I do is I will gain stage them to see how that works out. Now I'm kind of abandoning a bit this elimination of the potentiometers because both of these pedals are incredibly awesome, but they can get wiry in the upper distortion range. And even when it comes to the tone in the bass, or the bass in the high in this case, they can get super wiry. Even the volumes can get really boosted. So they're incredibly cool in that respect. But when you turn these things, it gets gnarly. And I promise you, I will turn them up. But for our test today, I have them at their essential noon positions. Now, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag a bit here. I've already heard these pedals, and I know that these are relatively close settings as far as not being too wiry. And this is not meant to be a perfect scientific test. This is about what are we getting out of it. So that being said, let's go ahead and then talk about the signal chain. So we've talked about the pedals, we've talked about the test. So I'm running today my triple rectifier. It's a 2-channel from the 90s. Of course, because, you know, 90s kid. No, that's not it at all. But it's running, these pedals are running straight into the front of this amplifier. And then that is, the signal from the amplifier is then going to a 1x12 cab that has a Celestion V30 loaded into it from 1995. And we're capturing all of this with a standard Shure SM57, which is aptly now called, because of Glenn Fricker, the cockroach of microphones. Still kills me to say it to this day. Glenn, you are the man. Can you believe Glenn, in his recent video, called the SM57 the cockroach mic of all micdom, I guess, if that's a word. But hysterical, Glenn. You're the man. I absolutely love that. You bring it every video and you pull 0 punches, and I am 100% here for it. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, go watch Glenn's recent video where he does a shootout that brings to light a ribbon microphone, and I'm not capturing the company's name at the moment, not because I don't want to, but I just can't remember. But what resonates with me most out of that video, that A, ribbon mics are cool, and they are, and B, the SM57 is a standard because that was what was available, and I've said that here. It's become legendary because of that. It's one of the budget microphones that everybody can afford, and wow, I'm still talking way too much. So let's not unpack that anymore. Watch the cockroach SM57 video because that's what we're capturing here. And Glenn, don't flame me too hard here on this because I am using a vintage 30 and I'm using this thing. Okay, all right. So let's get back into the next part of this. So what I need to do right now, we've talked about the signal chain again. It's this amplifier to a 1x12 cab with a vintage 30, and it's running to an SM57. I don't put any additional processing on it. So what you're getting to here is it is what it is through this simple signal chain. and then I will grab my guitar of choice for this. So give me a moment. We'll be right back, and we're going to hear what these pedals sound like. Stay tuned. All right, we're officially ready for grudge match time. The axe of choice for this test is my 2006 Dean Evo. It has a Gibson Burstbucker loaded in the bridge, and we will stay in that bridge position because we want to get maximum output to these pedals to ensure we're getting the full signal as much as possible and the most that we can. So we've got the Evo, and again, we're running into this amplifier behind me. Let's take a listen. So again, the first part of this test is going to be quite simple. I'm going to start with the DOD Grunge, and as you see here in the video, or sorry, in the second feed, we have it set to its lowest gain setting, and you can see the same is true for the death metal. So the grunge is B, death metal is A, and I'm going to come back and give you my thoughts. Let's take a listen and hear how they sound. Hopefully this goes the way I intend it to, and let's hear it. All right, so that again, let me just start by saying the grunge pedal has such an awesome tonal palette to work with, and while it does at the top end of its range get quite wiry, in this state, it really sounds great. I mean, it to me probably fits very closely with, let's say, a Boss Distortion 1. Like, I feel like it hangs nicely in there. But let's talk a little bit about the death metal, because that was a slightly different flavoring. Versus the grunge pedal. I noticed that it was a little darker. It didn't have the same top end. I feel like the spirit of the distortion was quite good. It was very similar in that regard. So from first blush, is there a clear winner, better or worse? No, and that's typical because that's not what we're really here for. We're really here to say how inherently different are they. They sound similar. You can tell they're in the same family. And at the lowest gain setting, you're going to get a darker pedal. So that's the data point we'll pull from this. And now let's move the scream and the grunge, which is just the distortion or the gain, all the way to the middle position, because that's where it gets not so crazy and still is pretty controllable and pleasing to the ear without it being utilized as a tool in the mix. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and just move these both up to that middle position as best as possible. And again, we'll start with the grunge, and let's take a listen. Let's hear how it sounds. We'll AB and we'll be right back. So there you have it. Wow. So right away, I bet we would all agree that the death metal has a little bit more bite to it. You could hear the fizzy top end coming through. The grunge still balanced, maybe a little more. You're just hearing more of that gain coming in. And again, I feel like with some gain staging, there could be a cool showdown between if you used a boost pedal and something like a Boss SD1 or even a Boss SD1 Wazacraft might be very close to these. So again, if you're thinking about like, okay, do I have this already? Because that's some of the things we want to explore. Maybe there's a pedal combination that mimics. We certainly know we can get there close with the grunge, but I think that's really cool. They're not that far apart. Okay, now the next test. I think this will be fun. I'm going to start with gain staging them in their current states, and then I'll come back and give my thoughts, and then we'll bring it. We're going to turn these things up and hear how wildly different they sound, or how wildly similar they sound. Similarly they sound. That's a lot to say. It's a mouthful there. All right, let's switch it back over here. We'll start with the grunge, because that's where we lean into. I'll do both very quick, just a very quick, so we get that in our ears, and then we'll gain stage them and see what that sounds like. All right, here we go. So there you have it. Yep. Gain stage, it works. I'm gonna gain stage them right now. So right now we have the grunge pedal selected, and I think the best way to do this well is for me to start playing and then start tweaking, because honestly, they're great. I think these two gain stage well, but I think we're gonna find out once I turn these up that maybe gain staging them at this level either is the best thing in the world or absolutely bonkers, and I'm here for both. So let's take a listen. I'll do some tweaking. I'll come back, we'll give some final thoughts, and then we're gonna land the plane on this episode. Sorry that took me a minute to clear some things up here, because that is so much gain. That is so much insane gain. Insane Gain. That's a new song. We should totally create a jam that's called Insane Gain, because that's exactly what both of these had. But let me see if I can unpack these briefly, and then we'll have some closing thoughts and we'll land the plane on this episode. All right, so I started with the grunge pedal and I turned the knobs up, did a little tweaking there, and I noticed right away that once you engage the treble, it does like almost like a it's a filter. At the end of the day, these are filters. So you filter out a lot of the low end, and then you insert more low end, and that filter things differently. And then you turn the volume up, and you got all of this mud. That's what I'll just say. It wasn't poor or bad like sounding mud, but that's exactly what you got. And then it was the same thing with the death metal pedal. Is, you know, the higher you get in the gain, it's like, wow, it kind of does this spiky, crazy thing. And I'll talk about the elephant in the room here in a second, which is the crazy feedback thing that was happening. But then again, same thing with the death metal pedal. It has like the treble really did something, like it filtered everything out, and then you add the bass, and then that kind of then tweaks the whole circuit oddly, and then you crank the volume and you get all this low end coming back in, not to mention the insane amount of gain both of these pedals have. And then the gain staging was my favorite part. I wish I could kind of take get a time machine back to like 1991 and been like, hey, Kurt Cobain, you have a grunge pedal that you don't know exists yet, but wait a year and totally get one, and a death metal pedal, and then put them together and gain stage them, and you will be able to write an entire record of insanity that you'll just absolutely love, because that's exactly what that was. Pure, raw, unadulterated insanity. Would be one of the sickest sounds if it could be tamed to not overdo it in a mix. To have this unique feedback relationship between you and the instrument. And that's what I'll say I got out of this. Like the feedback between what was happening in real time with the amp itself, and not just the feedback from the pedal, but it's what's happening with the guitar. And you can actually feel like you're controlling that to some extent. So that was different, and it was fun. And so, well, let's go back to our original 3 questions. Could you get this tone with other pedals? I don't know. I probably might take a couple high gain or several boost pedals and overdrive pedals to really get all of that, but I think you could make anything sound like trash cans slamming together in a car accident at 2,000 miles an hour where everything is just instantly decimated itself, because that's exactly how I would quantify how that sounded in the most sincere, best way possible, to the point where I want to create a jam that has that on there because it is insanely cool. Yeah. So do I think you could get this? Do I have a pathway to get there? Nope. Do I need to recreate it? Maybe. Will I? Probably not. Why? Because I have 2 pedals that are doing that. But if you needed a pathway to that, maybe it's worth exploring. Do you think I should try to recreate this tone that these things get? Well, let me know in the comments. The second question was, is there a winner? No, there isn't. The winner is you if you own both of these pedals, because you're going to have a whole lot of fun on your hands, and you will drive any sound engineer crazy because the gain on these things is just bonkers. And then lastly, my final thoughts on all of this, just again, being able to explore and have some fun. And that's the purpose of what I'm doing here. This is just passive content, my muddlings, my thoughts, a simple test, and to just have fun. And if you're not doing that here, then maybe you should. Maybe you should allow yourself the flexibility to have fun. And I don't mean doing that here. What I meant by that is if you're not exploring and having fun doing that, and you believe that everything has to be done just so, I don't think that's always true. I think there's so much inherent value in exploring, and that's what this is all about today. It was just about the exploration, and what a blast. So I'm gonna leave you guys with this one. Hey, if you haven't experimented with one of your pedals today, get motivated. Get in there and try it. Grab a couple of them, and if you don't have any, well, you know what? There's lots of free plugins out there, and just experiment, have fun. Again, be curious. That is all I have for you, ladies and gentlemen, today. And I want to say thank you to all of you who have supported my channel by subscribing and, embarking on this journey. We're 30 subscribers in, and honestly, that is amazing. So thank you to all of you who have subscribed, and I can't wait to see how far we take this thing together. And I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm going to keep doing it until I don't. Until then, which is probably never, because I have lots of random thoughts. We will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.